Hey everybody, it's Romania Black. We're on episode 7 of Heaven Official's Blessing. Technically episode 6, but episode 7 as Netflix calls it. And there's been a lot happening in this series. Episode 5 and 6 have been wonderful, getting all the exposition. Last episode, old Sanlong and old Xie Lian getting closer to one another into their little domestic, little friendship, acquaintanceship, however you want to call it. I have lots of notes from episode 5 and episode 6, and I want to definitely go over them before pulling up my character cheat sheet and starting out with that. But man, there's just a lot happened with episode 7 or episode 6 going into this next episode, and I have a lot of notes that I want to read, lots of comments from people that I think are important to bring out. But yeah, this mysterious man showing up, sand falling out of him, something's wrong, he's dying, and they're like, oh, help, priest, get the god to help. And Xie Lian's like, well, funny that. So I do have a lot of comments. I'm going to start out with comments from episode 5, and then they'll carry over into the comments from episode 6. SGGLBH314, hope I get that right, or it might be SQQ, talked about how oxen in Chinese mythology actually were thought to have been able to see ghosts. So Taoists would actually dip ox tears into their eyes, so thinking that they would help them see spirits. So I'm like, that's pretty cool. And it also explains why the oxen freaked out about the ghosts before the others did. They could see them before the others. That makes sense. Pretty cool. Qian Fong talked about how the bandages are called Ruyi or Ruji. Good to know. Ruyi. I will get it pronounced right eventually. It'll just take me the entire season. But also talked about how Ling Wen, for all we know, is the only god that's doing paperwork, which sucks for Ling Wen, but doesn't get a lot of respect from the other gods. They really just consider her job to be pretty mindless and like a noble cause, not worthy of praise. So it does make sense too that she kind of is like, oh, when Xie Lian like praises her and says thank you, she's like, oh wow, nobody thanks me around here. So that's kind of a cool way to interpret that scene as well from episode 5. I liked that. Had a big like note that says awe beside it. TC Ganko or TSYGANKO talked about how Xie Lian is also basically the god of recycling, which I think is pretty cool because it ties to like the whole thing of one man's trash is another man's treasure. It ties to his view of Huachang, where he's like, you know, this one guy is King Ghost. You guys think he's trash, but he might be my treasure. I'm like, oh, Xie Lian. I like that. The idea that he's a scrap collecting god. That's pretty cool. I like that a lot. Dean noted that the red umbrella in tradition of Chinese weddings is usually held by the matron of honor and held over the bride at the arrival of the ceremony, which kind of ties into the bridegroom leading Xie Lian off of the carriage back in episode 1. But that also it was a way of warding off evil and symbolizes fullness for a happy marriage. I'm like, oh, isn't that sweet? Old Huachang just coming out there with that umbrella for Xie Lian, and Xie Lian just doesn't even realize what it's for. It's like, aw. Molly MIGH noted that to ascend, it's not really necessarily that you did a good thing, it's that it's something outstanding, which does paint the heavenly realm kind of in a little morally gray aspect, because it's like, oh wow, it's not that you did all these great things, it's that you did something outstanding. So if you committed genocide, that's pretty outstanding. Maybe we'll let you ascend to be a god. I'm like, oh, that seems a bit problematic. So maybe that explains why Sanlong has such a negative view of the heavenly realm in this last episode comparatively. For the record, Xie Lian is being very neutral about the subject. Xie Lian is not really saying that anybody's good or bad. They're just like, hey, it's not my business. Everybody do them. So it's like, it's interesting to make that comparison. So thank you, Molly. Kaylin V noted about the whole fetus spirit thing. So I was questioning the fetus spirit back in episode 5. Talking about how it's really just this childlike voice, and that Xie Lian had pretty much pegged everything to Shanji, being like, okay, I get how this was Shanji and how this was Shanji, but the child singing, I don't get. That's the mystery. I don't get how this fetus spirit or this kid singing is tied to Shanji at all, because Shanji, for all we know, didn't have a child. So that's interesting. I like that there's still that little mystery that's unsolved. There's an aspect of the case that hasn't been solved, and I'm like, I wonder if each little case that Xie Lian deals with has that little unsolved aspect, and they're all going to thread together. That'd be really cool if that happened in XTX. If you could narratively make that a thing, I'd appreciate it. But it's just really cool because it's like, okay, something is left behind. The mystery is it's not case closed. There's something left unsaid, and I really like that. Ivan as Ida talks in episode 6 about how several characters have red eyeliner. It's not just San Long. The red eyeliner is like a big old red herring. It's like we can't really equate everybody with red eyeliner to Hua Chong. It's just San Long has it, so it's just one little thing, you know. But also that Long can refer to, and several people commented on this, not just Ivan as Ida, several people commented about how Long as a name can translate not only to the third son, but also to lover. And I was like, oh, funny that. But I like that Ivan Ida said it could also tie to the fact that this is MXTX's third work. It's technically her third son. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's really neat. I like that. And then also the will-o-wisps are considered to be guides for the spirits into the human realm. And old Xie Lian's out here just zapping them all away. Fun time. Anastasia talked about how Xie Lian accepted that he's a commoner. So that whole scene where he just takes off his outer robe when he goes to sleep, because I was like, oh, the scandal. And Anastasia was saying that, well, unlike Modao Zushi, where everybody in Modao Zushi that's a cultivator is pretty much nobility, and they're like, oh my goodness, show an ankle, take off your outer robe. In this, Xie Lian is basically... Xie Lian thinks of himself as a commoner here. So he's like, you know, he's so humble and has no shame, and he's not modest at all. He's like, no, it's fine. I'm not royalty. I can shuck this. It's interesting. I was like, okay, he's that humble. And I like how Anastasia said that with Wangshen are referred to as lifelong friends who became lovers in a day, whereas Xie Lian and our guy that might be Hua Chong, might be just San Long, are basically strangers that went to becoming domestic husbands in a night. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. The nice little contrast there. I like it a lot. Goldmund talked about how the Ghost Festival is actually called the Bond Festival in Japanese, and it is where ghostly immortal realms are open, and at night the ghosts can roam aimlessly around the world. I'm like, that's pretty cool. And it kind of ties into a comment that's going to happen later on in here. But Sarah Linda, I like Sarah Linda talking about how San Long and Xie Lian, they're living their like best humble domestic life at this little shanty that Xie Lian has made into a shrine. And in all reality, Xie Lian is basically a god and has been a god 3 times. And San Long, if he is Hua Chong, is basically the king of ghosts. And you have these two all-powerful beings living in a little seaside shanty, making it into a shrine and doing domestic work. It's so perfect. It reminds me, if you've read Modao Zushi and watched it, of the ending. Spoilers, the next 30 seconds. If you're not privy to the ending of Modao Zushi, I'm going to spoil it in the next 30 seconds, so just skip ahead 30 seconds. But it compares to the ending of Modao Zushi, where Wanji and Wuxin can live their best life in domestic bliss, these two powerful cultivators. It's kind of like that early on, though, only instead of at the ending of the story, it's at the very beginning with Xie Lian and San Long. So that's really cool. I like that a lot. End of Modao Zushi spoilers. But yeah, I thought that was really cool that you mentioned that. And that San Long is definitely different. Sarah Linda talked about how San Long is different than Hua Chong in not only in the personality. If they are in fact the same person, we're seeing two different sides of the same possible coin. You have San Long, who's very blunt, honest. There's not really a lot of mystery with San Long, except is he Hua Chong? That's like literally the only mystery. He's pretty blunt and to the point, but he's also kind of flirtatious and very open with that flirting with Xie Lian, whereas Hua Chong, from what we've seen of him interacting with Xie Lian, is much more mysterious and cool and seductive, and, you know, has his beautiful butterflies. So it's like if they are in fact the same person, and we don't know that yet, I suspect that they are, but if they are, we're seeing two sides of the same person, and Xie Lian just maybe is in love with both. I don't know, right? I like it. Four Sunsets talked about how San Long, Long again meaning lover, but also calling Xie Lian Gege, and I can never, the reason why I didn't bring it up in the last episode is because I'm horrible at pronouncing it. I think it's Gege, awful at pronouncing it, but basically talking about how it means, it's a term of endearment for someone. I think Four Sunsets likened it to if San Long was calling Xie Lian honey buns, which I thought was hilarious. I was like, well, he is our cinnamon roll deity, so him being called honey buns seems pretty appropriate. I'm kind of all about that. And then that the imprisonment on the ghosts, they're not guards, they're actually inmates. The imprisonment is referring to them being inmates roaming around the human realm, not guards. They're not looking for anybody, they're actually the ghosts that have been imprisoned wandering around with the will-o-wisps. I'm like, oh, okay, that's good to know. And then finally, Anime Annie talked about how in their conversation on the bed in the last episode, Xie Lian takes a very neutral approach. Like, Xie Lian does not want to judge anybody, doesn't want to like name names or put blame on anybody. They're very much like, well, bad things might have happened and we shouldn't judge. San Long is very much like, no, these guys are wrong. He has a very much more negative view of the godly realm, of the heavenly realm, than Xie Lian does. And I'm like, very interesting. And also, Xie Lian at the very end was telling the people not to pray for wealth. And one of those reasons could be that Xie Lian's like, no, it's bad luck. I'm not going to bring you the wealth that you want. That's not the kind of deity I am. But also it could be that Xie Lian is trying to be respectful of the water god that apparently has become like the wealth god as well. And it's like, oh, I don't want to get in his territory. Nope. Don't be let me encroach on that. So that's interesting. But yeah, lots of comments about this episode. Poured myself some juice. I'm ready to watch Heaven Official's Blessing, Chuanggon Shufu, and see what all happens, right? So let's not waste any more time. I've talked for a good solid 10 minutes, but we're going to start episode 7, technically episode 6 of Heaven Official's Blessing here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. These episodes aren't long enough. They're not long enough. I see why you all are freaking out about season 2 coming out of this series, because season 2, it can't get here soon enough. And I'm only barely halfway through season 1. I'm already like, I already know it's not going to be enough. Luckily, I'm going to have the novel to chew through along with the manhwa and be like, okay, I've at least got the artistry and the novel and all the things that can't be said in this donghua that's going to get expanded upon the novel. At least we have volume 1 of that and everything to get through whilst we wait for some announcement about season 2 of the donghua. But I didn't know how the relationship dynamic between Xie Lian and old San Long would get any better. But then I realized, wait, what if we added Feng and Yao back into this? What if we did that? What if we added Non-Feng and Fu Yao back into the mix, and now they have to be like the third and fourth wheels to Xie Lian and San Long? And I was like, oh, that'd be fun. And that's basically what this episode was. So interesting. Lots of curious things. I had to bring Whiteboard Kun out because I was like, okay, we need to break down this whole half moon pass thing and what's going on with it and how it's tying in. I'm pretty sure, I skipped the OP to go back into this episode, but I'm pretty sure that the one deity that looked like a deity that was standing atop the palace or whatever is actually the Wrath, that is in charge of the Sandstorm and has turned half moon pass and half life pass. I'm like, okay, cool. So we're gonna put that up here. We're gonna have half moon, half life pass. Okay, and the whole history behind it. What I really like about this is that San Long kind of justifies everything that he knows, because Yao gets onto him. Yao's like, you know an awful lot. You're being very suspicious. He's like, yeah, I read a book. He's like, it's you guys who are ignorant. And it's like, oh! So Long being able to defend himself and saying, no, this is how I know this. It's pretty basic knowledge if you just read. And it's like, ah. So it's kind of his way of, I still think he's Hua Chong. I still think he is, for reasons. So we're gonna have the half moon, half life pass lore featured right over here, and then over here we're gonna have our little thing about Hua Chong / San Long here. We're gonna talk about him here because there's still some fishy stuff going on here, and then a few more things about our poor boy Xie Lian. Oh my God, Xie Lian, the more we get into this, the more I'm like, dude, they just spit on him. They don't like him. And I can see why if San Long, and if he is Hua Chong, if he, I can see why he wants to defend Xie Lian, because he's like, you're just getting the shaft. Now, what we don't know is, okay, what has Xie Lian done in the past? Because there's a part of me that's like, okay, I have a feeling that Xie Lian has done some things in his prior existence. He was a martial god when he first ascended. He was a martial god, which battles monsters, so he's ridiculously strong. And then he was a plague god for 30 minutes, and that went south. So my theory at this point is that Xie Lian has done something really horrible in the past. Something that like either killed a lot of people, or if it's tied to the human face disease, if maybe he was responsible for it breaking out and not being able to stop it. But whatever he's done something horrible in the past. And now it's humbled him to the point where he's just trying to like live this meager existence and make up for all the wrongs that he's done. It would kind of make sense because he was a crown prince, right? He was literally a prince. And typically, unless it's a true fairy tale, typically princes are usually kind of, some of them are snobby, or they're at least elitist a little bit. I mean, not all princes, obviously, in storytelling, but a lot of them are. So it wouldn't surprise me if Xie Lian was kind of, when he was the crown prince, if maybe his first ascension was doing something that wasn't great, it was just outstanding, and he wasn't a nice person, and then over the course of his first ascension, and then the whole thing with Bai Wushang happening, if maybe he realized the errors of his ways and was like, shit, I messed up. And now he's spending this third life trying to reforge his appearance and reputation and basically trying to redeem himself, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if that's the case or not, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's tied to that. We'll find out in the novel, and as the story goes, I'm sure it'll all come to light, but that's really interesting. But yeah, so this episode, I did not imagine that the man would be a puppet. Didn't see that coming. I thought maybe he'd be a ghost. I was like, oh, is he a ghost? Whenever they did the whole thing with the water, I'm like, oh, is he a ghost maybe? And that's it. But no, he's a puppet. So puppets do exist in this world. They're kind of like the base slaves or the Buno, right? Maybe that's it. Or the Binu. Maybe he's one of those. I like that the first thing he sees is San Long when he wakes up. And San Long's just sitting there like, oh, hey. And then he looks over to Xie Lian, and Xie Lian's like, oh, hey. I wonder if San Long knew that he was a puppet the whole time and was just letting Xie Lian figure it out, and he knew Xie Lian was a god and he was strong enough to handle it. That's the one thing I do forget about in this, and I keep forgetting about it until it's brought up again. But Xie Lian, people, the commoners, or the mortals in the human realm, do not know that he's the god. They don't know he's a deity. They just assume he's the priest or the one holding the shrine. I forget that other than, I think San Long knows, other than him and the deputies, they don't know that he's the actual deity. They just think he's the priest that's, erected the shrine. It's like, okay. But yeah, and Xie Lian looks so concerned. He's like, oh, hey. And then, of course, the guy he's like, I just escaped. I'm not going back. Okay. And he says, help me, priest. And I love the angry cat face that San Long has. Like, you're not fooling anybody. That's that face. And if he's a ghost king, he would, of course, be like, that act isn't going to fool anybody. You're trying to hurt my bae, and I don't like it. Right? And Xie Lian, meanwhile, is just like, hi, friend. Xie Lian's like, do you want to be friends? I'm friendly. It's great. I'm like, oh, my God. And then I like that when he looks over to San Long, he's like, did you do something? He's like, no clue what he's thinking. I was like, come on. It's this episode's hilarious, like what is known and not noticed by Xie Lian. And he's like, I'm the owner of this shrine, and if you need help, I'll see what I can do. I like that he doesn't make promises, right? That's another thing with Xie Lian. He's like, I'm not making a promise that I'll be able to help you. He's like, I'll see what I can do. Again, that seems like it speaks from experience, that Xie Lian's like, I know what it's like to make a promise not being able to keep it. And he's like, I don't want to do that again. So it's like, okay. And he says, you didn't want to go back. Go back to where? And then this half moon pass, I just escaped from there. Okay, but he calls a half moon pass, right? He makes it sound like he called a half moon pass in this moment, unless it's a translation issue, because Xie Lian would know what that was. But then when he describes it again, he's like, oh, it's more like half-life pass now. It's like, well, then why'd you call it that if it changed 200 years ago? Why'd you still call it that? Why didn't you start out with half-life pass, right? So it was just to get him intrigued. It was to entice him with something that he knows, right? He says, what happened there? And then he says, you don't know? And he's like, all I know is that it's an oasis in the Gobi Desert. Okay. So, as far as we know, when it was at its half moon days, it was an oasis in the Gobi Desert. All right. Got that. And he says its moon, half moon night scene is breathtaking, which explains its name. And he's like, oasis, breathtaking scenery. He's like, that's how it was 200 years ago. Now it should be renamed Half-Life Pass. Okay, so it should be renamed. So he's like, okay. So that was 200 years ago. It was nice. I feel like it's been 200 years, and we don't get confirmation of this, so I don't want to know yet, but it feels like it's been 200 years. It's been 200 years since old Xie Lian ascended or knew anything outside of the mortal realm. It's been like 2 centuries, right? Okay. And I like that as he's describing it as Half-Life Pass, we pan back to see the black boots of old San Long. And I love that look he's giving. That look that San Long, that like side profile of him, right? It's so good. Because it's just like he's listening, being like, what are you going to tell him, puppet? It's just like, that's what it seems like. He's just soaking it all in, right? At least half the people who went there disappeared. Okay. So, the puppet, as we come to find out, says that half the people disappeared that go there. But then he said he was the only one out of 60 that survived. So it's like, okay, well, which is it, right? Is it just one person, or did half of them really go missing? And then Xie Lian's like, how did you know? And he's like, I've seen it myself. At that time, a caravan was about to go past the place. They knew it was haunted. So they hired the priest from my shrine to protect them. And that's when the sandstorm kicks up that he's talking about, and it's soaked. He's like, something weird happened. Everyone got soaked up, and then in this group of 60, I was the only one that survived. Right, so... And then, of course, Xie Lian's like, I want to believe you, but that makes no sense. He's like, of 60 people, he's like, wait a minute. He's like, there aren't even 200 victims of Shanji over the last 100 years. Okay, so he's suggesting that he points out that the side note that there have been 200 victims in 100 years to Shanji. But this guy is suggesting that 60 were attacked in one day. He's like, I feel like in that moment, Xie Lian's like, now wait a minute. Surely if all those people were attacked in one go-around, in one day, that would draw the attention of the heavenly realm. That would be like a major attack by a ghost or a wrath or a devastation level ghost. That seems like it would be warranting some investigation, and we've not heard anything about it. So something sounds fishy. And I love that he's like, since when did Half Moon Pass turn into this Half-Life Pass? And he's like, I'm not sure. But word has it started 150 years ago when an evil priest occupied the place. So, okay. So things are getting put, two and two getting put together. So 150 years ago, 50 years after that 200 thing, so the evil priest took over. Okay. They took over 150 years ago. And I love when Xie Lian looks over to San Long, and San Long's got his head up against the boards like, the guy just goofed. He's like, you just said you fled all the way from Half Moon Pass. Yeah, I barely made it out. And he's like, I see. I just love how San Long is just not impressed. He's like, you really goofed, right? So there's this air of mischievous, almost like devilish knowing, right? It feels very much in that moment. I was like, that feels like a Hua Chong thing where he's just like, oh, you just goofed. What are you gonna do? He's like, I see. And I love that he looks over to Xie Lian and the eyebrow thing he does where he's like, do you think we should test this guy to make sure he's not a ghost? Shouldn't we do it? Like the way he just like wiggles his eyebrows and Xie Lian's like, oh yeah! And he just does that customer service smile. The F me eyes between these two, I cannot. cannot take it. And he's like, you must be thirsty after all that running since you came all the way from the desert. Have some water. And he's like, oh, I can't do that. I'll turn into mush, because he's actually made of sand. He's like, well, he's like, have some. Make yourself at home. And then he's like, but that's why the sand was coming out of him, because he's actually like a puppet made out of sand. He can't have the water. And I love Xie Lian's like just that smile. It's such a fake smile, because we've seen Xie Lian really smile, and this one is totally fake. And he looks over, and Sanlong is like, go ahead. Nothing's stopping you. Yeah, oh my god, I love it. And he pretends to drink, but he doesn't actually drink anything at all. And Sanlong's like, you're not doing anything. And Xie Lian's like, you're not actually drinking it. And when he stops him, he's like, you can't drink it, right? Yeah. And that's when he tries, so he has the talisman on him, that's what that's for. And he tries to he goes straight for Xie Lian's throat. Yep. And I like that Sanlong's like, no, he's got this. He's got this. He just tips it away. Yeah. And then, yeah, his hand just dissolves into mush. Ugh. It's kind of gross the way it just becomes like a ribbon. And so he goes with the bandages to get him, but Hua Chong, or sorry, Sanlong took the chopstick that he was eating with and puts it right through his ankle. His Achilles heel right there. And that somehow seems to do it. Okay, here's the thing. Him getting hit right in the heel with that chopstick dissolved him completely into sand, right? It completely dissolved him. Now, hold on. If you were really just a normal mortal human, Sanlong, how did your chopstick that you've been nibbling on for the last, or been scratching yourself with for who knows how long, how did that manage to render him completely helpless? Unless that's something to do with your essence as being the Ghost King that did it. I'm just saying. And when he walks in front of Xie Lian, he has that smirk on his face yep, did it. And Xie Lian's like, wow, that worked. Funny that. He's like, oh, it's tainted. I'll have to make you a new one later. And he's like, yeah, you're fine. Interesting. And so they say he's just a puppet. He didn't have any internal organs. Interesting. And yeah, Sanlong's like, it's hard enough to make a puppet act like human beings. But he didn't show any ghost aura and inactivated talisman. This Muppeteer must be powerful. So, okay. That helps to establish some things too. He's like, wow, the puppeteer must be powerful to make a puppet that is not suspicious. Okay. So that's interesting, because that begs the question, right? So this puppet looked like a human. Other humans can interact with it. And there wasn't any sign that he wasn't anything but a human until the whole thing with the water and all that. So who's to say, how do we know that maybe Sanlong, or this body that is Sanlong, is it a puppet of Hua Chong's? We don't know for sure, but I'm putting it out there as a possibility that maybe he's a puppet of Hua Chong, and Hua Chong just made him this puppet, and he's going to evaporate into butterflies at some point, if something bad happens to him. We don't know, right? But yeah, so whoever this powerful priest is, they're powerful enough to make a puppet that's not immediately suspicious. That also furthers the logic that, yeah, this could be Hua Chong, because even though it passes all the tests of it not being a ghost, Hua Chong is apparently so powerful that may not matter, right? I don't know. Interesting enough. And then I like Xie Lian's like, wow, I didn't expect you to dabble in this kind of craft too, Sanlong. And he's like, oh, just a bit. And when he says just a bit, it cuts to just his smirk, just a bit. It's like, you could not be more obvious. I'm like, yes, no. He's like, I just dabble a little bit in the dark arts. Just king of an entire realm of it. You know. And he's like, don't you think it's fishy? And Xie Lian's like, well, yeah, it seems very odd. So, okay. So I like that Sanlong's like, hey, don't you think it's odd that all this stuff's been going on and nobody's been questioning it? Don't you think that's weird? That for 150 years, people have been disappearing and nobody said anything about it or tried to stop it, or the gods haven't interfered at all? Think that's kind of funny. Might want to go ask about it. So it almost seems like Song Long is trying to show Xie Lian that things with the heavenly realm are not great. Yeah, things with the heavenly realm are not good. Are not good, or as good as he thinks that Xie Lian thinks that they are. And here's the thing. I think Xie Lian knows that things aren't good with the heavenly realm, but he's so non-judgmental and kind that he tries to like give them all the benefit of the doubt over and over again. And Song Long is like, no, I'm done with the benefit of the doubt. No, not gonna work. So it's hilarious that we cut from this seemingly bad situation in the mortal realm. Well, wow, there's this possible wrath that's causing destruction and devastation, kind of like what was happening with Shang-Chi. The deities aren't doing anything about it. Gee, shouldn't we go ask about it and see if anybody wants to check up on that? So he decides to go back to the heavenly realm to ask if anybody knows anything about it. And so again, I love that, one, there's a giant flower in the centerpiece of the array that we have, the communication array, even though I know this is all just it's a front, that in the novel, as y'all have said, that it's just like telepathic communication, but here they give it a physical manifestation, which I like it. I like that they give it like a Zoom chat feel, because it would be kind of weird if it was just all in Xie Lian's head. And if this is all in Xie Lian's head with the flower, it kind of fits as well. But here they're like, it's mine, don't take it, don't take it. There's more than enough. Don't fight, I got so many. How many? How many do you want? It's mine, don't touch it. You're still collecting, I won't be polite. The heavenly realm with the wind master. So in the heavenly realm, all of the gods are being greedy with the merits, which seems to be in contrast to Xie Lian. Because even though Xie Lian built his own altar, his own shrine, which on the surface seemed like a really greedy thing to do if you're building your own shrine, Xie Lian is like basically turned everybody away from praying to him. He's like, no. He's like, I can't solve your problems. Go away. Go find another deity that can. He's not actively, now that his debt's paid off, he's not actively like trying to overdo it and get all these extra merits. That's not his thing, right? Mm-mm. And so he's like, there's more, but he sees all the merits, and everybody's just grabbing for them. They're like little petals and leaflets. And I like that Ling Wen is just sitting in the middle. They're like, hey, what are you doing? How are you doing in the mortal realm? And he's like, oh, he's like, I'm fine. He's just like, I don't want to talk about it. He's like, I'm fine. He's like, what's happening? And so they say that the Wind Master is back and he's giving out merits. And everybody's arguing over it, right? 100 merits. Why'd I only get one? And all Xie Lian can say is, wow, the Wind Master's so generous. I'm like, something seems amuck. But Xie Lian's being kind about it. And I like that when Ling Wen says, are you going to join him? And he's like, no, I'm fine. Yeah, he's fine. He doesn't need the merits. That's the thing. Xie Lian is not greedy, right? He's not greedy. He has bigger fish to fry. He's trying to help the mortals in the mortal realm. He could care less about the heavenly realm and all the goods there, which again seems like it's tied to his character, but it seems like something that's developed over time. But when he asks about Half Moon Pass, everybody kind of stops and looks at him like, and he's like, has anybody heard about Half Moon? And then they all go back to what they were doing. And they're like, the Wind Master gave out another 100,000 merits. And I feel so bad because he's just like, nobody is here to help me. It feels like the Charlie Brown moment from Peanuts, where Charlie Brown's just like kicking his feet against the thing. Like, nobody wants to help our cinnamon bun. It's so sad. And then I like that Ling Wen's like, now wait a minute. Why are you interested in the Half Moon Pass? And he says, a puppet came to me claiming that he fled from there. He's like, he said that for the last 150 years, half the people who went past it went missing. And I like that Ling Wen's eyes like kind of narrow at that, like, you weren't supposed to find out. He's like, I find it odd. So I came here to research it. And as we know, as he says later, which is one of my favorite lines from Xie Lian so far, he's like, odd does not mean dangerous. Odd just means, he's like, it's different than the norm. So he's like, I wanted to research and find out more about it. Xie Lian does not draw conclusions immediately. He's like, something seems amiss and seems different. So I want to find out more about it. And so I want to research it so then I can draw my own conclusions. And Ling Wen's like, Your Highness, I suggest you leave it alone. Collecting merits is hard. And Xie Lian's like, that's suspicious that you say that, Ling Wen. Why? Was what he was saying true? And she says, be careful. We really shouldn't talk too much about it. It's better not to dig up some affairs of the heavenly realm. So, we don't talk about Half Moon Pass. So the heavenly realm does not talk about Half Moon Pass. We don't deal with that because somehow it has something related. It's related to something that the heavenly realm doesn't want to talk about. So you know what Xie Lian's going to do? He's going to get involved. Because that's just how Xie Lian works. He's like, He's like, well, I'm going to go get involved anyway. I love that while he's gone, San Long just sits there waiting for him. Waiting patiently. And then he comes in. I do think it's funny. I'm going to be curious when we get to the novel to see where Xie Lian actually went because it's all happening in his head. I'm assuming that San Long was just sitting there waiting for him to come back from his mental Zoom session, being like, hey, how'd it go? And so he says, I'm going to be out of town for a while. Are you going to have Moon Pass? And I like that the puppet still, the corpse of the puppet is still there. It's still on the floor, right? He's like, all right, Xie Lian, bring me with you. And he's like, oh, it's far and away and the place is sandy. Why would you want to come? He's like, well, if that's the case, why do you bother about it? And he's like, I used to collect scraps in the Half Moon Kingdom. Okay. So Xie Lian, I'm like, are you telling a white lie there? Xie Lian says he has business collecting scraps. Okay. In the Half Moon Pass. Okay. And maybe that is the case. Maybe he's going there to get merits. Maybe he's going there to, like, spread the good word about his scrap collecting. Maybe that's part of his deal. Maybe he did used to go there. He seems to know about it. He's like, when I hear about what happened, I'm a little concerned. And I liked it. I just like that little smile from San Long, like, you're such a cute little liar. Like, that's his face. And he's like, that's adorable that you're going to lie about it, but I can see right through it. He's like, well, do you want to know who the evil priest is? And he's like, you know about that too? I just love how it's like, San Long does not have to do much to just cast the line and reel him in. It's like, he's not even trying. He's like, Xie Lian is so whipped for everything that San Long has to give him. It's so cute. He's like, you know about that too? He's like, oh, well, it did still exist 200 years ago. So we got this thing, all right? They talk about, we go back into the past. And for a second there, you see the guy, like, swiping off. It looks like somebody from Legend of the Last Avatar, The Last Airbender, or Legend of Korra. It looks like a character from that. The Half Moon people were strong and aggressive. So it's funny that the people of this oasis, so at the beginning, the Half Moon Pass people were strong and aggressive. That's interesting because it's like, you wouldn't think that. You're like, really? Okay. It's so odd, right? Because they talked about it being an oasis and they often harass the people of Central Plain. Okay. And so we're going to tie this into here. Harassed Central Plain. Okay. So these two kingdoms possibly at near war with each other, from the sounds of it. Okay, and the evil priest of Half Moon. And we see somebody dressed in like purple robes with a very similar headdress to in the OP. Is the Imperial Preceptor. I'm assuming if there's any kind of translation squabble, y'all are going to mention it. So the Half Moon priest is supposedly evil, the priest of the city, and is also their imperial Preceptor. Okay. Real quick, out of just blatant curiosity, I want to look. So, an instructor, a teacher. So, like a teacher of sorcery, maybe. Okay, is what a preceptor is. Okay, so like a sorcerer. And then, and Xie Lian's about to ask more, but he's like, oh, here's my broom. Hold this. I'm going to see who it is. I was like, it's going to be the two gods. Yeah, it's going to be the deputy gods. It's going to be Feng and Yao. And I love that Xie Lian's like, oh, hey, what are you guys doing here? I didn't ask for help. I'm sure that Ling Wen and also maybe also Qing and Shin probably sent them as well. And they're like, are you going to have Moon Pass? It's like, well, how'd you know? We heard about you guys. And I like this too. I like that Yao and Feng actually were listening to him in the communication array. They didn't say it, but they were listening to him. Everybody else ignored him, but not these two. These two, Xie Lian has wormed his way into their hearts. And now they feel like they need to protect him like a puppy. And so like, we heard you're planning to do something that's risky. And so we came to help. It's like, oh, what are you going there for? And he's like, oh, I just have some concerns. It's like, it's no big deal. Why are you here? And then he's like, what are you here for? And they're both like, and they have these swords and everything. And he's like, oh. And he's like, I see. I volunteer, right? Uh-huh. So basically, they were sent to go protect him and keep him from getting into trouble. When do we depart? And he's like, now! He's like, we're gonna go. He's like, what's the rush? And so they decide to draw the teleportation. He's like, first things first. If there's anything you can't cope with, just run away. I love that. I love Xie Lian. His motto is, if you can't cope with it, just run away. That seems like it's tied to his character. I'm sure we'll get more about that in the book. But Xie Lian's like, if you can't cope, run. Okay. Again, I feel like that's going to be like a meta commentary about his character later on, but we're not there yet. And so then I like that in the midst of this little introduction thing and them deciding to go, that Long is like, who are they? And then they're like, who are you? I love it. I love that Xie Lian's like, wait, no. He's like, San Long, they're my friends. And they're like, don't talk to him. Why? Do they know him? He's like, not really. Why are you so agitated? And he's like, oh, are they your servants? I love that he's like, oh, do you have servants? Which he clearly knows that they're not. But he's like, no, they're my assistants. I love that Yao's like, He's like, oh, really? Can you do me a favor then? And he tosses him the broom. Oh my gosh, I freaking love it. Because yeah, that's the thing. Now, why would Song say, oh, are these your servants? Hua Chong would say that. Yeah, but why would... And I love that San Long just teases Yao and Feng. Just teases the snot out of him. I love it. And Yao seems to get the most bitter about it. And I love that Xie Lian's like, I only have one broom. Please don't destroy it. I need to clean with it. And he's gonna like, I'm like, this is the funny thing. He's like, stop. No. Please calm down. And I like that San Long treats it like it's a show. He's like, oh, bravo, what a great light show. Like, he doesn't want to let on. Because, yeah, I'm like, Yao, you're just revealing to this mortal that you're a deity, right? And so, luckily for him, and we, the audience, know that San Long knows better, but he treats it like it's a magic act. He's like, oh, bravo, what a great show. What's this magic you're doing? And then I like that Feng has a little bit more concern. He's like, what's his name? Where's he from? Why is he with you? He's like the adult asking Xie Lian, like, where'd you find this stranger? Where's he from? What's his name? Why is he with you? Like, we can't leave you alone for 5 minutes, Xie Lian, until you need an adult. It's like, I like that he's so concerned. He's like, I met him on the way. His name is San Long. And since he has nowhere to go, I let him stay with me. I love that Yao just gets mad because San Long is teasing him, whereas Feng takes like the adult approach, being like, how could you let him in? What if he has an ulterior motive? What did we tell you about strangers, Xie Lian? It's like, and he's like, oh, no. He's like, calm down. He's like, it's fine. And they're like, how can we calm down? And he's like, this is the part that got me when he says, I have nothing to be taken advantage of. You have your body, Xie Lian. He's like, even this shrine needs donations for repairs. And they're like, oh. He's like, it's all right, that's enough. Let's just head to the Half Moon Pass. He thinks so little of himself. He's like, why would anybody take advantage of me? There's nothing to be taken advantage of. I'm like, I was like, oh, Xie Lian, no, don't say that. Don't say that. But he thinks so little of himself. I'm just waiting for San Long or Hua Chong, if it's him, to be like, no, you're worth the world. Like something romantic like that. It seems like something romantic like that would happen. I'm like, He's like, if you fight here, then I'll have to rebuild the shrine. He's like, and I don't have any money to rebuild it. It's like, oh my God. And I like that Feng is like the voice of reason. Feng is like, fine. And Yao is the more like impetuous, instantly angered. And Feng is like, okay, let's just take this out. I like their personalities. We're starting to see how they're different, right? He's like, it was a simple misunderstanding. I hope you don't mind. He's like, if you said so, how could I mind? I'm like, shut up! Just like, you're too suave. You're too suave, San Long. And he's like, maybe I look familiar to him. At that point, I was just like, wink at the camera as hard as you can. Like, maybe I look familiar. And Xie Lian's like, does that mean he's the Ghost King? And Yao's like, really? Yeah, you do. That's why I've mistaken you for someone I know. He's like, what a coincidence. You both look familiar to me too. It's like, yeah, you all have seen each other because he was Hua Chong. Like, ah. And then I like that Yao's like, you live in this slum? The slum that you were about to destroy 5 seconds ago? He's like, I've always lived in places like this. So that's interesting. That's interesting that Xie Lian says that he's always lived in quote-unquote slums. But we, the audience, know that he was the crown prince. So clearly, no, he's lived in a nice castle, but maybe since being demoted from that original godly status, like during the time he was the plague god, during the time in between that moment and this, he has lived life to life in a slum. Maybe that has been it. I'm very curious now to know how he ascended the third time. Like, what was the circumstance? Because he was a scrap collector, so how did that happen? How did he ascend for a third time? What was the purpose? What was the meaning? Now I'm curious to know, like, all the circumstances each time he's ascended. Like, what was the outstanding deed that he did? I have a feeling that the outstanding deed, the first and second time, may not be good and maybe horribly heartbreaking, and we're all going to cry our eyes out at. But I feel like the third time is something small, and maybe, I'm like, why? If you people didn't want him to ascend a third time, what was the reason? I'm curious. I'm curious to know what the reason was. But I don't want to know yet. I don't want to be spoiled. I know it's going to come out in the wash, but that's interesting. And then I like that, I was like, well, where's the bed? And Feng is listening. He's like, oh, it's right there. That little mat. And I like that they both just stare at it like, and then he's like, you slept with him? He's like, is there anything wrong with that? And he's like, I love Yao's expression, like, well, it's not so much that there's anything wrong with it as, what? And he's like, I'm done. Feng's like, no, let's not do this. Let's not talk anymore about this. And there's the formation. And then they both, of course, because it's Yao and Feng, they have to tease each other about the formation. And he's like, all right. He's like, let's do this. Let me get my hat, my trademark hat with my veil. Let's go. Let's go solve the mystery. I freaking love the dynamic. And then he says, may the heaven officials' blessing shatter all taboos. I freaking love the idea. I'm all about, like, this is the type of fairy tale element that I love. Like, the teleportation, like, the magic devices. It feels very much like Labyrinth. It feels very much like a little, like, secret fairy tale-esque fantasy stuff. Like, I love this. This is my jam. And so I'm all about these cool little techniques that they have. And it very much, like, transports them to the Half Moon Pass. But see, it says people disappear, but these people are all here. And so then, of course, San Long, our leader of exposition, who is certainly not a ghost king, is giving Xie Lian the heads up of what's been going on the past 200 years. Because he's noticed that Xie Lian is not up to date on his Half Moon Pass lore, and he needs to know these things. And conveniently, either Yao or Feng don't know about it themselves, or they don't want to tell Xie Lian, so that's Sanlong's job. He says, according to ancient records, when the moon sets, follow the directions of Polaris and you'll find the Half Moon Kingdom. Okay, so they're not at the Half Moon Kingdom yet. They just gotta follow the star. And how romantic! Just like following the starlight together. Come on. It's Polaris. It's so bright. The northwestern night sky looks broader than that of the central plain. It's like, oh, and I love that Feng's like, why is he here? Why'd you bring this guy? What's the point? And he's like, Taoist magic is so amazing. I have to see it for myself. So that's his excuse. He's like, oh, well, you Taoists have like such magical properties. He's still calling them Taoists. He's like, oh, you guys are priests, right? You're not gods or anything, right? He is pretending to be in the dark, right? He's playing along. He's playing along to their personas, right? He's playing along, being like, well, here's the thing. I know that you guys are gods, but I'm not going to say that out loud because that'll reveal that I'm more than a mortal. And I don't want you all to know that I'm actually Hua Chong. So I'm just going to play along and be like, oh, it's just the Taoist magic, isn't it? Wink, wink. Nudge, nudge. And then I like that Feng's like, are we here for sightseeing? And Xie Lian's like, never mind, he's just here. Just ignore him. Let's continue on with the mission. We have enough food. And he's like, Sanlong, just follow us. Don't get lost. And they're like, is it really a matter of food that you've brought this scraggler along? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. It's great. So, we touch base in the midst of the desert. I feel like the theme song for Aladdin needs to kick in as we've gotten these guys like following along the path through the desert, trying to like find their merry way. And here's the thing. This is the part that's interesting, is that for Feng and Yao and Xie Lian, they're not really affected by the heat because they're deities. But oddly enough, old Sanlong is affected. He seems to be affected. So either he's faking it and just trying to act like he's human, so of course he'd be affected by the heat. Or he might be a puppet, we don't know, made by Hua Chong, and he is getting affected by it. And so Xie Lian says, yeah, we could transport faster through the teleportation, but the further away it is, the more spiritual power it uses. So we need them to save up their power in case it'll be a long time before it can be used again. And he's like, well, why can't you draw one then? And so he's like, he points to Yao, and he's like, Yao needs to save his powers just in case. He's like, we're trying to be conservative here because we don't know what type of priest, if they're powerful, like what we're going to be dealing with. So we don't need to do anything rash yet. Uh-huh. And then I just love how just grumpy he looks. He's like, okay. But here's the thing, y'all. This whole scene with the hat. I can't wait to freaking read this scene. Because he's like, I'll let you have this. Like, he pulls his robe down. Like, he pulls it down and gives him his hat. And again, this episode loves to do, like, the thing where we just see his smile. We just see him from, like, the nose down. Like Hua Chong. And he has the hat. Uh-huh. And he's like, and there's just a little hint of height difference between Xie Lian and Sanlong, just a little bit of height difference, and part of it you could say is because of the dune. The dune makes Sanlong look a little bit taller, but he goes to like tie it under his chin, and Long gets a little uncomfortable. He's like, but then he sees Xie Lian smile, and he's like, no, you're too perfect. You need to keep the hat. He's like, well, just let me know if you need it. And he's like, by the way, what's the matter with the evil priest? You didn't finish your story. And he's like, well, since you're intrigued, I'll go on. Uh-huh. He's like, the imperial preceptor of Half Moon is one of 2 evil priests. And he's like, one of 2? Who's the other one? It's the imperial preceptor Feng Xin of Central Plain. But Feng Xin, isn't Feng Xin the one that is Feng Xin? Isn't that Nanyang? Isn't that one of the gods that Yao's with? Isn't that a thing? Or am I thinking, is there another Feng Xin? Because I have down here, Feng Xin was the name of what? Now I have Feng Xin, not Feng Xin. I have Feng Xin, who is Nanyang, which was the god, but there's Feng. Okay, so let me write this down because I'm like, wait a minute. So there was also the Central Plain. So he was the Half Moon priest. Then there was the Central Plain priest, okay, that was also quote unquote evil and was the imperial preceptor. And their name is Feng Xin. But we know that Yao, or we know that, we get this right here, that Yao, right? Yao is a deputy priest for Feng Xin, who used to be, or no, that's Feng. Okay, not Yao, but Feng. Let me get this right. There's too many Fengs and Fongs. Too many Fengs and Fongs in this story. So Feng, we know that non-Feng is the deputy person for Feng Xin, who used to be non-Yong. So the Feng and Feng is tripping me up here. They seem like they're the same person, but I guess they're not. Had to think that one through for a second. Okay. And so clearly you see that Feng is a little bit aggravated. He's like, the Half Moon Kingdom lies in the path between the Central Plain and the West. So the border clashes occur frequently. And 200 years ago, the Central Plain defeated the Half Moon Kingdom. Okay, so we have like all these birds and everything. So 200 years ago, let me get this right. 200 years ago, okay, the Central Plain defeated the Half Moon Kingdom. Okay, which would that tie to when old Feng Xin ascended? Would that tie to that around that same time? Could that be it? I don't know for sure. The Half Moon's evil priest, orphan of the Half Moon Kingdom, wandered about with no place to go. Okay, so because the kingdom was defeated, the Half Moon priest that was evil here didn't have any place to go to, so they just wandered around. But they seem like a woman, right? Yeah, it seems like a woman. While growing up, the priest learned sorcery from someone. So, okay. So the Half Moon priest learned sorcery from someone we don't know. Go figure. From someone. And then I love that you see her hair come out. It's in the braids. I love it. Okay. I'm like, did Hua Chong teach her sorcery? Her hair's in braids. I don't know. Didn't Hua Chong have a braid? I don't know if that's a thing. Intimidated by the priest's power, the Half Moon people anointed the priest as their imperial preceptor. Okay. Interesting. Back then, two countries were stuck in a tug of war. Oh, and an altar was set up. Okay. Claiming that it was to guard the soldiers. I want to go back to that. Okay. So they established that she had no place to go and learned sorcery from someone. Okay. And then got the people to worship her. Okay. Intimidated by the priest's power, the Half Moon people anointed the priest as their imperial preceptor. So it sounds like, though, that they worshipped her. So then the Half Moon people that had been defeated by the Central Plains, they worshipped her. Okay. And it looks like she became a god, like she ascended, right? Because that's the big old thing going up. So that begs the question too, like, what is the distinction between becoming a god? So it seems like you have ascending to godhood, right? And then you have quote unquote descending into ghosthood. But what's the difference? Because it's been established that these realms are permeable. You can go in and out of the ghost realm, mortal realm, and human realm. So what's the difference? Like what? Excuse me. It's like, okay, so what's the difference between the god and ghosthood? Like, how does this work? We don't know that yet. Yeah, claiming that it was to guard the soldiers at the altar. The soldiers' morale was boosted, and they fought to guard the city gate. Okay. And so then with arrows and rocks and swords, the battle raged on. And we see the priest there. However, the imperial preceptor opened the city gate and the climax of the battle, and tens of thousands of enemy soldiers flooded in, and the city became a blood altar. Oh, okay. So what it sounds like is that the priest that had ascended, the priest from the half moon pass, they ascended, but then they turned their shrine, their altar, into that for a blood sacrifice, and taking like the blood of thousands of soldiers, the blood offering, the Imperial improved their black sorcery and became a wrath. Okay. And the Half Moon Kingdom became the Half Moon Pass. Okay. So, to enhance sorcery and become a wrath. So it sounds like that maybe the difference between godhood and ghosthood, maybe the difference between those two is that godhood relies on this outstanding feat to be accomplished to ascend, but then you gain your power through the worshiping and merits from your followers, like the faith of others. Whereas with ghosthood, because that could be the thing. That could be the thing too. We don't know the full story about the priest yet with the Half Moon Pass, but it could be that the priest was like, well, this is just becoming a never-ending war. I'm not going to have enough followers if we keep having... I'm not going to stay powerful with followers if the followers keep getting killed by the other side. So, why not instead, to gain power, I just kill most of them and use that as like a blood sacrifice and become a ghost or a wrath instead. That seems like maybe that's it. Maybe that in order, if you descend into ghosthood, it's like through a blood sacrifice. Well, if that's the case with Hua Chong, then Hua Chong descended into ghosthood from the blood of all of the other ghosts that he killed. Because that seems like, I know he got out of that layer by killing a bunch of ghosts, and that got like the Crimson Flower, that whole name getting brought about. So maybe that's the case. It would be interesting if Hua Chong and San Long, if Hua Chong became a ghost after killing all these people, but he's like the most tenderest puppy dog to Xie Lian. I don't know. So that seems to be like part of the lore that we're finding out, is that to become a ghost, there needs to be like some kind of blood sacrifice, which would make sense with Shanji if she were killing like the brides and taking the blood from them. That would, to increase her power, that would kind of tie it to it. And she was tied to Qi Rong, so it's interesting. We're getting more and more little details, right? And what about the remains of the kingdom? After being destroyed, the place was haunted by evil spirits. So it's this spooky place. The oasis houses were gradually engulfed by deserts. And then Xie Lian's like, what about the rumor of the missing people? And he's like, well, I heard that the evil priest fed the passerby to the dead soldiers' spirits, lest they starve and destroy themselves. Okay, so that's why they knew the puppet was lying, because apparently the Half Moon Pass is now just this graveyard, this like ghost city that's just filled with evil spirits, and that anybody that shows up is fed to the spirits to keep them satiated, so they don't destroy themselves, so they could be used to guard the city. Okay. I love Xie Lian looks so concerned. And then, yeah, I was like, wow, you know an awful lot about this ghost world. And he's like, oh, it's nothing. He's like, it's you who are ignorant. And yeah, I was like, excuse me? He's like, I read it all in a book. He's like, reveal yourself. And I love that it misses him. And I love that it just misses him. And San Long's like, I read it in a book, silly. Like, don't fire your Taoist things at me. I love it. I love it. He just turns his head. He's like, it's just a story from an ancient record. Anybody could look it up. Why are you enraged? Ah! He's like, although the story is not verified, the Half Moon Kingdom did exist. I like that Xie Lian's like, whoa, 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 he's just telling me something he read. It's all right. We're just having book club back here. Yeah, and then I like again, that Feng instantly diffuses the tension by saying, oh, look over there. There's a shack. So here's the thing. It's like, Xie Lian's like, it's going to get hotter. Let's take a break here. And immediately San Long's like, I'll go explore the place. Now, again, tying to the fact that I think that San Long is Hua Chong, I'm sure he went to go check out that house to make sure that there were no evil spirits or anything that would harm his puppy dog boyfriend, Xie Lian. He's like, let me go take care of this and make sure we're all good, right? Or anything that would... I feel like San Long very much wants to direct the narrative a certain way. And so he wants to make sure that everything is safe, but that also they can keep going and he can keep talking to Xie Lian as he pleases. Meanwhile, Yao's like, Your Highness, don't you think he's odd? And that sparks my favorite conversation of this whole episode, where he's like, don't you think he's odd, Xie Lian? And Xie Lian's like, yes, I do think he's odd. And he's like, then why are you keeping him around then? What if he's dangerous? And he's like, Nanfeng. He like scolds him. He's like, Nanfeng, no. He says, just because, he's like, that's not right. Like, he says, just because you're odd does not mean dangerous. He's like, I look odd to others, but do you think I'm dangerous? It's like, oh, yeah, he's like, I look odd making my little haphazard little shack, and I have my bandages and my straw hat. He's like, I probably look odd, but he's like, do you judge me? He's like, don't judge others just because they're different. I'm like, Xie Lian, you sweetheart, you blessed soul. And he's like, besides, I've tested him. And then they're like, anything? And he's like, no, there's nothing suspicious. And I love that both of them are like, if he's not human, there's only one possibility left. So we have the possibility. So if he's not a human, the only possibility left is that he's a ghost king of devastation rank. Which is the truth. Yup. So basically, I like that there's confirmation that, well, he's either human or he's ghost king of devastation rank. I'm just saying. Yeah, and then, of course, Xie Lian's like, why would a ghost king be so free to collect scraps with me in the village? Because he's in love with you. For reasons we don't know yet, but because he loves you. That's why he's going to collect scraps with you, silly. He's like, San Long and I get along well. I have nothing worth exploiting. Yeah. And they're like, no. We need to test him again. That's why we brought our extra things with us. He's like, well, you guys are deputy gods. He's probably just a youngster who ran away from home. I like Xie Lian's like, there's probably nothing suspicious about him whatsoever. He's just a quick-witted, well-read youth who's just wandering around with me, you know. Be nice. Don't bully him. Oh, yeah, I was like, Yao has like such a badger face. He's like, don't bully him. And he's like, but, and Xie Lian's like, no, be nice. I cannot, y'all. I can't. Xie Lian is too much of a puppy and a saint, and I can't deal with it. They're just building him up. They're building Xie Lian up to be this beautiful saintly cinnamon bun. So we find out his tragic backstory. It's going to rip our hearts out and stomp on them so hard, and we're not going to be able to do anything about it. That's what's going to happen. Yep, I can see it now. So we go to this house. It's pretty ransacked. Nothing to see here. Except a table and some chairs. And so then we have, and of course, I love that Xie Lian gives him the water pouch. And he takes a drink and then he's going to offer it back. And they, of course, he wanted a direct kiss. He wanted a direct kiss from Xie Lian. He drank out of it and he gave it to Xie Lian. Xie Lian drank out of it and he's like, can I have that back? Like he wanted an indirect kiss. And Yao's not having it. So he's like, I have water too in this mysterious shaped container. And I like that Xie Lian's like, the truth-shaped serum. And San Long's like, wow, this is what you've resorted to. Okay. Yeah, the true-shaped serum. He's like, why can't I have Xie Lian's water? And he's like, well, the water's running out. And he's like, really? You two can go first. And he's like, no, you drink it. I love this back and forth. He's like, you guys are being suspicious. And they finally convince him to drink the water. And he does, and nothing happens. So maybe the serum wasn't strong enough. Maybe he was stronger than the serum. I don't know. But Yao, he basically ends up taking the water and he asks if it's poisonous. And then I like that Feng sees the writing on the wall. Feng knows. He's like, damn it, this guy likes Xie Lian. So, Xie Lian, you answer. Is the water poisonous? And Xie Lian's like, well, no, but... He's like, it's not poisonous per se. And he's like, that's fine. That's all I need to know. And of course they're like, I love that they're so shocked. And then nothing happens. He's like, it doesn't taste good. But he cracks the pot. He's like, this bottle is much better. The bottle of Xie Lian. And so then this guy's like, young man. Again, nothing suspicious about you guys that look the same age as him calling him young man. He says, I'll give you a sword for protection. And And then Xie Lian's like, it's the red mirror, the ghost revealing sword. He says, wasn't it pawned? So, the red mirror, the ghost revealing sword. So, interesting. It seems like maybe Xie Lian is remembering from his past life. Just a little bit. Maybe he's remembering a little bit. Like, oh yeah, didn't that get pawned? Wasn't that Nanyang's sword? He's like, didn't we pawn it away? And he's like, where did you get this? And he's like, it's Feng Shin's sword. He got it back after his ascension. And so I borrowed it for the trip. And he's like, oh. So I like that they just casually had this conversation in front of San Long, assuming he doesn't know who Feng Shin is. And he's like, let me have a look. But now where he grabbed it, okay, where he grabbed the sword at the hilt is where it broke. So I'm like, you just broke that sword so that it wouldn't show who you were, right? Because that is the sword of an actual god. That's the thing. The little container with the water was just a tool, right, that Yao had. It didn't have any ties, didn't have any direct ties to Shanjin himself. But this is exactly Feng Shin's sword. So if it's a lot more powerful, and so he's like, okay, this is a sword of an actual god. It will show us a ghost. It will reveal a ghost. So it makes sense that where San Long grabbed it, it broke it so it wouldn't show the reflection. Clever. Clever, clever, clever. And they're like, so what did you go find here? And I like that Xie Lian's like, what we gonna get? But because the blade is broken, because the blade's broken, it doesn't show him. He's like, Xie Lian, are they teasing me? It's a broken sword. So, yeah, literally, am I saying that San Long, who is clearly not Hua Chong, just broke a god's sword? Possibly. He's like, I guess you didn't want to give me a broken sword. It must have accidentally broken on the way here. Yeah, no. Oh my god. Yeah, no, he's Hua Chong, he has to be. I love it. He's like, don't worry, I can do without a sword. I'm sure. And Xie Lian's like, well, there might be a sandstorm soon. Okay, he says if we go on, I don't know if we can find a safe shelter anywhere. Okay, so I like that as he's getting ready to shut the windows because he doesn't want the sandstorm, that's when he sees the two characters running around in the sandstorm, looking creepy as hell. I don't know what's creepy about it, but there's just something creepy about the way that they run. It's very like, it almost feels, on the one hand, Wizard of Oz-ish. Like, it's just kind of creepy and unsettling that it's just like these figures running out in the snow, or in the sand, but also feels like there was a 1980s or 1970s, it was unfinished animation production, and it was kind of based on Arabian Nights, and I think it was it the Cobbler, it was like the Cobbler and the Thief or something like that, but it was, the animation style looks kind of like it. It's odd. He's like, are you giving up just like this? And he says, someone seems to be out there. And I like that San Long is the first person to stand up like, wait, somebody's out there? Somebody that could hurt you? Like, he stands up immediately and comes to the window, whereas Yao and Feng are like, wait, what? And then, yeah, so it's these two figures running in the sand like they're kicking up the storm itself, right? It's definitely not a caravan. Ordinary people won't show up here at this time. So it seems like they're the two priests, right? Is the evil priest you mentioned a man or a woman? And he says, I heard that it's a woman. And Xie Lian's like, oh. So you see, it looks like there's two priests, right? It looks like there's two women priests that are out there, which I'm thinking are the priests for the half moon and the central plain. So maybe this Feng Shin is somebody different than Feng Shin. Maybe it is somebody different, right? Maybe. Yeah. And that so there's someone there that has like, I love the mint robes, and like it looks like mint robes, and there's like the ornate thing and everything, and her hair is brunette. She looks beautiful, right? Okay. And she looks like she sees Xie Lian. Okay. But she's smiling. Okay. Like she's gonna kick up the sandstorm. Let's follow her. I feel like they're making the sandstorm. They're working together maybe to kick it up. I don't know. So much mystery. So much mystery. Yeah. But they go chase after her, and then poor Xie Lian is about to lose his hat And he says, be careful to San Long. And that's when he notices that his robe is falling off of his shoulders. He's like, well, let me help you fix that. This moment here was so freaking romantic. It was so cute that he fixes his robes and tucks them. And I like that San Long's like, don't do that. Like, you know, his little expression as he looks away. And in this moment where he grabs the hat and puts it back on his head and like has to lean over and reach across him, like reach over him. And they're like so close that they could possibly kiss, but he can't have that, right? And he like tucks up the string and everything under him. Like freaking adorable. These two are, and then of course then our third and fourth wheels have to come break it up. Like that moment between them. What? Yeah. And so Xie Lian thinks it's sorcery. Like this is just too much. And Yao's like, no, how bad could it be? It's not sorcery. He's like, I'm afraid that there's something else in the wind. Maybe they're the ones messing with us. Olivia's like, let's find a shelter for us. Like, you shouldn't have left the place you were at. You shouldn't have left, right? And then Yao says, well, fine. If we're going to call it sorcery, maybe the wind manipulated us to stop right here. And then if so, we should just keep going. We shouldn't stop right here. And San Long's like, do you find it incredibly gratifying to do things against others' will? Like, he's like, are you just saying this, you know, because you don't want to go along with what Xie Lian said? He's like, what did you say? And Xie Lian's like, let's not start a fight out here in the middle of a sandstorm. And I'm like, fine. And then as he says, can it blow us into the sky? What happens? But Xie Lian gets blown into the sky, right? And so then, and of course, San Long reaches out for him. And then the sandstorm kicks up, and he tells the bandage, he tells it to grab something solid. And what does he grab onto something solid? He grabs onto San Long, right? He grabs onto San Long to help him. Now, did he grab onto San Long, the bandages, or did San Long grab onto him? He's like, I didn't mean him. And then, I got away from him. Dang it. Oh no, honey. And that's damn, it just ended. No. I have a feeling I'm going to want to binge this show so badly. So badly. But yeah, okay, fine. So lots of questions. So we got this lore about the Half Moon Pass. There's possibly 2 priests, possible ghosts, could be gods, working together maybe, working against each other. We don't know for sure, but there's a mystery with that whole business. There's all that. San Long is certainly not Hua Chong. Certainly not. We've just not proved that at all this episode that it could be him. Feng and Yao are the best third and fourth wheels ever. And then Xie Lian is a practical cinnamon bun who must be protected at all costs. So, I kind of love how Feng like watches over him. I love how Feng gets so parental with him. It's really sweet. But yeah, this was a great episode. I'm very curious to know what's going to happen next, but I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait and hear your comments and just see what we go to from there. Maybe, hopefully I can wait. I'll try to wait some more. I don't know if I can though. This whole series, every episode's left on a cliffhanger and I'm like, how am I supposed to wait? But I'm going to try. I'm going to try my hardest, so. But anyway, this is a great episode, so I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. I hope y'all enjoyed this reaction and discussion and Whiteboard Coon coming out here to help me. But yeah, in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with more Heaven Officials Blessing. Bye.